Everyone turned when my mother tapped her fork against the champagne glass. The sharp little ring sliced right through the music and the chatter. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned toward the center table like someone had hit pause on the whole room. I was sitting right next to her, still wearing my graduation gown. My cap lay on the table beside my untouched plate. The banner at the entrance had my name printed in big letters. On the wall behind us, a slideshow of my life was frozen on a picture of me in my cap and hood, holding my diploma. This was supposed to be my night. My mother stood up, wearing the smile she always saved for other people's approval. Her eyes skipped right over me and locked onto my younger sister, Lily, sitting across from me in a glittery dress that had nothing to do with my school colors and everything to do with her. "We have a very special announcement," my mother said, voice bright and polished. "Lily just got engaged." She grabbed Lily's left hand and lifted it high, like she was raising a trophy. The ring caught the chandelier light and flashed. The room erupted. Chairs scraped, people stood, phones flew into the air. Someone shouted for them to kiss, and the whole crowd laughed and clapped. My aunt started crying. A cousin climbed on a chair to get a better angle for a video. Behind them, the slideshow of my childhood stayed frozen on my face. Nobody was looking at it. Nobody was looking at me. My father jumped up, wrapped an arm around Lily and her fiancé, Daniel, and pulled them into a hug. "My baby girl," he said into the microphone someone had pressed into his hand, "I am so proud of you." The applause got even louder. I sat there, fingers still curled around my fork, watching everyone surge toward them. Relatives, neighbors, even one of my professors drifted into the crowd with a polite smile, probably thinking this was all part of some plan I had agreed to. It wasn't. My mother finally glanced down at me like she'd almost forgotten I existed. "You don't mind sharing the spotlight tonight, do you, Harper?" she said. "It's all such good news." She didn't wait for my answer. She never did. I felt the familiar heat crawl up the back of my neck. It was the same feeling I'd had 100 times before, standing on the sidelines while Lily took center stage. Only this time, the room had my name on the door. The invitations had my degree on them. The slideshow on the wall was my life. And none of that had protected this moment from becoming hers. People sometimes imagine that when you finally snap, you scream or throw something or make a giant scene. I didn't. In that exact moment, everything inside me went very calm, because it hit me that this wasn't an accident. It wasn't a funny little overlap. It was the clearest, loudest version of a story I'd been living since I was old enough to understand that my role in our family wasn't to be seen. It was to make things easier. So instead of standing up and begging them to notice me, I did something else. I pushed my chair back, I stood up quietly, and I walked out of my own graduation party without saying a word. Later, my parents would say they had no idea why I left. They would tell people I was sensitive or overwhelmed. What they did not know that night, while they toasted my sister's future in a hall with my name on the banner, was that I was already holding a key to something they cared much more about than my degree. That building, that venue. And by the time they tried to use it again, I wouldn't just be the girl walking out of that room. I would be one of the people who owned it. If you had met us when we were kids, you might have thought my family was perfect. We took matching Christmas card photos in sweaters my mother picked out. There was always a cake on the table for every birthday, candles lined up in an Instagram-worthy row. My parents made sure the house looked like a place you'd want to pin on a vision board. If you lined up all our framed photos, a pattern jumped out. Lily was always in the center. Lily at her dance recital, Lily holding trophies, Lily in her cheer uniform. There was an entire wall we jokingly called the Lily Museum. My mother never got tired of walking guests past it. My achievements lived quieter lives. My spelling bee ribbons lived under a magnet on the side of the fridge. The acceptance letter to my master's program sat on the kitchen counter for 2 days before it ended up under a stack of coupons. The only picture of me on that photo wall was a school portrait tucked in at the very end, like someone had remembered at the last minute that there were technically 2 children in the house. Lily was the golden child. She was beautiful and loud and social. Teachers adored her. Coaches fought over her. When she walked into a room, people leaned toward her like plants toward a window. I was the one who made sure the light bill was paid, so the metaphorical window would stay lit. It started small. My mother would say, "Harper, can you help Lily with her costume? I'm terrible with zippers." Or, "Harper, can you go over Lily's math homework? You're so good at that stuff." Every time I did, there was a thank you. Every time, there was also, "Lily, aren't you lucky to have a sister like this?" The message slid in under the words. My value was in how useful I was to other people's stories. In high school, it became more obvious. Lily's competitions decided our weekends. We drove across the state for her tournaments while my science fair dates got pushed or forgotten. When my senior awards night fell on the same evening as one of her final rehearsals, my mother squeezed my arm and said, "You don't really mind if we go to Lily's, do you? This is huge for her." My father followed it with, "We'll celebrate you at dinner this weekend, I promise." We didn't. I graduated with honors. They posted one photo on Facebook with a caption that mostly talked about how proud they were to have raised 2 such talented girls. You learn not to expect anything different. You tell yourself you're being mature when you swallow the little stabs. You tell yourself you don't really like attention anyway. By the time I got into my master's program in data analytics, I had convinced myself I was fine with being backstage. I liked numbers. Numbers didn't care who talked the loudest. My parents came to move me into my tiny apartment near campus. There were hugs and "we're proud of you" and quick photos before they drove back home to make it to one of Lily's showcases. That night, I ate takeout on my floor and told myself this would be worth it. Grad school was hard. Long nights in the computer lab, group projects where I always seemed to be the one who actually read the assignment, coffee that tasted like burnt stress. I also started picking up side work. A professor connected me with a local event venue owner who needed help understanding his booking and cost data. It sounded boring to everyone else. To me, it sounded like a puzzle. The owner's name was Victor. He was in his 50s with tired eyes and a wedding ring he twisted absently while he talked. He showed me spreadsheets full of dates and dollar amounts and notes scribbled in the margin. "I can tell you every couple's story," he said, "but not whether I'm actually making money or just staying busy." So I helped him. I spent nights building models, finding patterns in seasons and package types. I learned which weekends were secretly terrible for profit and which weekday corporate bookings kept the whole place afloat. We met a few times in his small office that smelled faintly like coffee and florist shop leftovers. "You've got a brain like an engine," he told me once. "You ever think about running something of your own?" I laughed it off. I was just the girl who kept other people's systems from falling apart, not someone who owned anything. Still, when he later mentioned he might be looking for a young partner in a few years, someone who could buy in slowly and help him modernize the business, I didn't forget. I just filed it under someday. Back home, my parents filed my progress under background noise. Calls were always half about me, half about Lily. When I texted to say I'd been offered a full-time position with a firm in another city after graduation, my mother replied, "That's great, honey. Can you help me figure out Lily's budget for a housewarming party?" So when they said they wanted to throw a big graduation celebration at Victor's venue, part of me was surprised. Another part of me thought, finally, maybe this time they're going to actually show up for me. The first time my parents walked into Victor's venue, my mother's eyes went straight to the chandeliers. "Oh, this is perfect," she said, running a hand over the back of a gold chair. "People are going to lose their minds when they see photos from here." Victor smiled politely and glanced at me. We both knew the room looked like every other mid-range event space in the state. High ceilings, neutral walls, polished floors that could be anything with the right lighting. But for my mother, it might as well have been a palace. She wanted everyone to see that her daughter's graduation was happening somewhere impressive. She wanted the photo op. Victor sat us down at his desk and pulled out a contract. "So this is for your daughter's graduation party," he said, pen hovering over the line that asked for the event type. "Master's graduation," my dad said, nodding at me. "She worked hard." I waited for my mother to say the same. She didn't. She looked at my sister, who had insisted on coming with us to help. "Maybe write graduation and family celebration. We might have another announcement by then." I felt a little flicker of unease. Victor hesitated, then wrote what my dad had said: graduation celebration. On the ride home, I tried to shake off the weird feeling. The next few weeks were a blur of finishing my thesis, working my campus job, and getting through final presentations. My mother texted me pictures of possible centerpieces, napkin colors, cake designs. She asked my opinion, but it felt like she was really asking, "Will this look good when people see it online?" The one thing she didn't ask was whether I wanted to invite anyone from my own life beyond the family and a couple of professors. I invited people anyway. My roommate from undergrad, 2 friends from my program, my advisor. On the day of graduation, I walked across the stage to the sound of my name being called. It felt like my breath caught somewhere between my ribs and my spine when I heard it echo through the hall. For a moment, everything else faded. Later, in the campus parking lot, my parents hugged me. My mother's mascara was perfect. My father told me again that they were proud. My sister took a dozen selfies with me, holding my cap at different angles. Then we drove to the venue. Seeing my name printed in big letters on the sign outside the hall did something to me. It felt almost like proof that this day actually belonged to me. Inside, the tables were set with the colors I had picked after all those texts. There was a cake with my university's emblem on it. A slideshow of my life played on the back wall, full of photos I had sent my mother and a few she probably dug out of old albums. Guests trickled in. My grandmother hugged me and cried. My uncle clapped loudly and told me I was the brain of the family. My advisor shook my hand and told my parents I was one of his best students. For the first hour, it was almost exactly what I'd wanted. I made a little speech, my dad said a few words about working hard, people toasted. The cake tasted like too much sugar and a little bit of relief. Then, somewhere between dessert and the DJ starting up the playlist, I noticed Lily fidgeting with her dress. She kept reaching up to touch the chain around her neck, where something small and shiny rested under the fabric. Her boyfriend, Daniel, stood unusually still beside her, one hand in the pocket of his jacket, fingers moving like he was counting the minutes. My mother's eyes kept bouncing between them and the microphone on the table. That flicker of unease in my chest turned into a steady thud. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself they wouldn't. Then my mother picked up her fork and tapped her glass. "We have a very special announcement," she said, voice already thick with happy tears she hadn't had for my degree. Lily's hand came up. The ring gleamed. The crowd roared, again, but bigger this time. And I knew exactly where I sat in the story. Not in the center, just slightly off to the side, in a chair no one would notice was empty. I could have stood up and begged them to see me. I could have snapped, called them selfish, ruined the moment for her. Everyone would have walked away with one sentence in their mouths. Harper ruined her sister's engagement. Not one person would have said, Harper's family hijacked her graduation party. So I did the only thing that protected me from another decade of that narrative. I got quietly out of my chair, walked past the tables, past the frozen slideshow, out through the double doors, into the hallway. No one called after me. No one asked where I was going. The last thing I heard before the door shut was my mother's voice, breathless and excited, saying, "Hold your hand up higher, honey. They can't see the ring in the back." The hallway felt almost cold after the heat of the ballroom. I leaned against the wall for a second and closed my eyes. I could feel the music starting up again on the other side of the doors, a bass thump under my feet. My name was still on the banner in the lobby. The slideshow was probably still looping my childhood, but my role in that room had been reduced to a prop. In the quiet, another image floated into my mind: Victor's office. That cramped little room near the back of the building where we'd sat over his spreadsheets months before. He had talked about retiring in a few years, about wanting someone who understood numbers and cared about people to help take over. "You have the kind of brain that keeps a place like this alive," he told me. "You ever think about owning something instead of just fixing it for someone else?" At the time, it had felt ridiculous. Me owning a venue? I didn't wear suits. I liked data, not throwing parties. But he had sent an email after our last meeting, spelled it out: a small ownership share to start, a clear path to increase it over time, payment terms that were actually possible on a young analyst's salary, control over certain policies, a real seat at the table when decisions were made. I had starred the email, stuck it in a folder called Maybe Later, and buried myself in finals. Out in the parking lot, I sat in my car and pulled out my phone. The email was still there. Subject line: partnership proposal. I opened it and scrolled slowly, reading every line like I was reading it for the first time. It wasn't just about money. It was about what my role would be. Voting rights on anything that changed the way the venue operated, authority to set and enforce standard pricing, input on which events to take, and which ones would cost more than they were worth. That sentence from months earlier echoed in my head. You keep giving discounts to the loudest people. You think you're being generous, but they're the ones draining you. Those loud people, in his files, had names I didn't know. Tonight, they had my own last name. I thought about my mother's voice, so confident when she said I wouldn't mind sharing, as if that was the only version of me she could imagine, the girl who always said yes, the girl who made herself smaller so other people's moments could be bigger. I stared at the glowing screen in my hand and realized I was holding more than a contract. I was holding a way to stop asking my family to recognize my value. This was a chance to define my own. There was a shaky little part of me that wanted to buy the place just to slam the door in their faces later. But underneath that, deeper and steadier, there was something else. I wanted to see what my life could look like if my work didn't end with, "Thank you, now make room for Lily." I started typing. "Hi, Victor. I've had some time to think, and I'm interested in moving forward with the equity share you offered. Can we talk about next steps?" My thumb hovered over send. Inside the hall, someone started chanting Lily's name. I pressed send. It wasn't a dramatic movie moment. There was no lightning strike, no swelling soundtrack, just a quiet decision to stop begging for space in a room that had shown me, over and over, that I was optional. I started my car, hands still a little shaky but steadier than they had any right to be, and I drove away, not as the girl who stormed out of her own party, but as the future co-owner of the stage my family seemed to love more than my presence on it. Life after that cracked into two timelines. In one, the visible one, I was just another 20-something woman moving to a new city with a degree and an entry-level job. I found a small apartment with noisy neighbors and a kitchen the size of a closet. I started at an analytics firm, spent my days buried in data sets and meetings. I learned which coffee shop opened earliest near the office and which bus line to avoid after 5. My parents told people, "Harper is doing something with numbers in the city," like I was a math-themed screensaver. Calls home were still mostly about Lily, her ring, her dress, her venue search. Apparently, my party had reminded them how much they loved that hall. In the other timeline, the quiet one, I was signing documents that changed my relationship to that building forever. Victor and I met with a lawyer. We talked about shares and voting rights and what would happen if one of us wanted to sell. I wired my first payment. It wasn't some massive, glamorous transfer. It was every bit of savings I had and a plan for the next few years. Then, one afternoon, sitting at my tiny table with my laptop, an email arrived. The subject line simply had both our names and the word agreement. I opened it. There it was. My name beside the word owner. Not the only owner, not the biggest, but real, legal, permanent enough that I had to reread it 3 times just to believe it. I didn't screenshot it for Instagram. I didn't send it to my parents. I sat there and let the idea settle into my bones, one vertebra at a time. I wasn't just fixing things for someone else anymore. I was building something that had my fingerprints on it. A few months after that, my phone rang at work. The number was familiar, but slightly off. The venue's main line. "Harper, it's Jenna from Harborview," the receptionist said. "We have a request you'll probably want to hear about." I swiveled my chair away from my coworkers. "What's going on?" "A new booking request for next May," she said. "The client asked for a discount and said, 'Our daughter's sister is basically family with the owner.' I checked your file, thought I should ask how you want to handle it." My stomach tightened. "What's the name?" I asked, even though I already knew. "Bride is Lily Lane," she said. "Contact is your mom's name." Of course. Of course they had chosen the same hall. I could almost hear my mother's voice saying, "People loved your party so much, it makes sense to go back." And of course, they had assumed that my connection to the place would be something they could cash in. "Did you say anything about me?" I asked. "Just that one of the owners would review their request," she said. "They seemed very confident." I took a breath. "Okay," I said. "Hold the date for now. No special rates. I'll call them myself." That night, my mother answered on the second ring. "Harper," she said, sounding delighted, "I was just thinking about you. We're knee-deep in wedding plans. It is chaos. You should see the binder." "I heard," I said. "You're looking at Harborview." "Of course," she said. "It was so beautiful for your party. Everyone still talks about that night. And now it'll be even more special for your sister. The woman at the desk said one of the owners would call us, but I told them, 'Oh, our Harper knows the owner. We're basically family there.'" "I don't just know the owner," I said. "I am one of the owners." Silence. For a moment, I wasn't sure the call had dropped. Then my mother laughed, short and sharp. "Very funny," she said. "You did some little project for him, I remember, but let's not be dramatic. Anyway, since you're close, you'll help us out, right? Maybe waive some of the fees. It's your sister's big day." "No," I said. The word came out steady. It surprised even me how solid it sounded in the air between us. You might be listening to this and feel a twist in your stomach at that single syllable. If you grew up like I did, you know how hard it is to say no to parents who have trained you to be their permanent yes. If part of you is already whispering, "I could never do that," I want you to know this. You are not alone in feeling that way. You are also not wrong for wanting to stop being the person everyone steps on to reach their own happy ending. If any part of this is hitting you right in that tender place you usually hide, stick with me. Because what happened next was the quietest, clearest boundary I had ever set. On the other end of the line, my mother's voice went cold in an instant. "What do you mean, no?" she snapped. "You are not seriously going to charge your own family full price?" "I'm telling you," I said. "You can book the hall at the same rate as every other couple. We have policies. I helped write them. I'm not breaking them because you expect special treatment." "You're being ridiculous," she said. "After everything we've done for you. We paid for that graduation party. We supported you all through school. Now you want to nickel and dime us over a venue?" I thought about the contract I'd seen later in Victor's files. The one that described my graduation as event, master's graduation and engagement announcement for Lily. They hadn't just hijacked my night. They had planned to. "You used my graduation to make an announcement for Lily," I said. "You turned my party into her party. You barely noticed when I walked out. You didn't call me for 3 days. The first text I got from you after that was a link to a picture of her ring." "We were excited," she said. "Excuse us for sharing good news. You always make things about you." I almost laughed. "I made my graduation about me," I said. "You made it about something else. This is me stopping that pattern." My father's voice came faintly in the background. "What's going on?" "Your daughter is trying to make us pay full price for her sister's wedding," my mother said, "at a place she owns." He came on the line. "Harper," he said, tired, "is this really necessary?" "Yes," I said, simply. There was a long pause. "We didn't mean to hurt you that night," he said. "You know that." "I believe you didn't think it through," I said, "but impact matters more than intention. And for once, I'm in a position where what I think actually shapes what happens. I'm not using that to punish you. I'm using it to finally respect myself." My mother made a sound like she'd bitten down on something sour. "You'll regret this," she said. "You are tearing this family apart over some petty power trip." "No," I said, feeling strangely calm. "I'm setting a price on something you've treated as free for years. Me." She hung up. "They booked the venue anyway, at full price. They signed the contract that had my name on the bottom as co-owner. On the night of Lily's wedding, I stayed in my little apartment in the city and made myself pasta. Around 9, my phone lit up with a notification from our event system. An incident report. Mother of bride requested an extra free hour of open bar. Claimed my daughter owns this place. Staff referred to contract. Request denied. Event continued without issue." I could picture the exact shape of my mother's outrage. For once, her version of the story didn't bend the rules. A few weeks later, my dad asked to meet halfway, between their town and mine. We ended up in a diner with sticky menus and coffee that tasted like burnt dust. He looked older. He slid a folded piece of paper across the table. It was a copy of my graduation contract. He had circled the event description in pen. "Your mother filled this out," he said. "I signed it without really reading that line. I told myself we were killing two birds with one stone. I told myself you wouldn't mind, because you never minded." He looked up at me, eyes tired and honest in a way I hadn't seen before. "That was wrong," he said. "We treated you like the supporting act in a life you were starring in. I can't change what we did. I just wanted you to know I see it now." I didn't forgive him on the spot. I didn't sweep decades of being overlooked under the cheap diner table. But I also didn't walk out. We talked about my work, about the venue, about what I would and wouldn't do for family going forward. My relationship with him started to shift, inch by inch, not because he suddenly became perfect, but because I stopped pretending I had no say. My mother didn't call. She sent one group photo from Lily's wedding. Everyone lined up in front of the hall I partly owned. I wasn't in it. I looked at the picture for a long second and felt nothing sharp, just a dull, quiet understanding. Some people would rather rewrite the story than admit they miscast you. I used to think family was something you protected at all costs, that your job was to keep everyone else comfortable, even if that meant shrinking yourself so small you barely existed. Now, sitting in my own place, my name on the lease, and on a piece of paper in a filing cabinet at Harborview, I know better. Family is not who you keep sacrificing yourself for. Family is who sees you when you walk into a room and keeps your name on the banner when it belongs there. If you grew up as the one who always made room, always said yes, always handed over your moment because it was easier, I hope my story gives you permission to question that. You are allowed to walk out of rooms that refuse to see you. You are allowed to own spaces where your boundaries matter. And you are allowed to say no, even when the people asking are the ones who raised you. If that hits somewhere deep, stay close, because next time, I want to tell you about a woman whose parents skipped her wedding and then tried to move into the house she bought without them, and what happened when she finally decided that family loyalty had to stop being a one-way street.